And welcome back to the Marvel Movie Minute, a daily podcast in which we explore the films of the Marvel Cinematic Universe 1 minute at a time. In this, our 5th season, we are looking at Joe Johnston's 2011 film Captain America, The First Avenger. I'm Andy Nelson from the Next Reel Film Podcast.
And I'm Pete Wright, and I can't wait to introduce you to our guest who ruins superhero physics.
Today we are talking about minute 80, which begins with Steve giving some uniform ideas to Howard and ends with Steve's first catch of the shield boomerang. Or is it the boomerang shield? Whatever it is. That's where we are. As Pete pointed out, Jason Dittmer is back on the show, author of Captain America and the Nationalist superhero. Let's dig into this minute.
Bringing that big vibranium energy.
Oh, yeah.
Big vibranium energy.
Which is to say, not much energy at all.
Not much energy.
It's totally absorbent.
Right.
I dampen the energy in any room I go to.
The human vibranium. Is that what?
Oh, my goodness.
Oh, well, this minute starts, Peggy has just walked out and we get the reaction shot of Steve and Howard watching her leave. Are they looking at her? Are they drawn to her because wow, powerful woman in the 40s? Or is it because she just pulled out a gun? Is it shock that she did something like this? What is this reaction that they both have? Any sense as to what we're meant to read here?
Oh, look, a powerful woman. We don't know what to do with that.
I mean, she did just try to shoot one of them. I mean, right. It seems, I think it's a combination, right? She's powerful enough to do that and walk out of the room and act as if nothing kind of unusual has happened. But it does have them as kind of schoolboy, kind of not quite lusting, but kind of absolutely enraptured by this display that they have just seen.
There is that sense wow, she is so much hotter now. Wow, she's a crazy, powerful woman. There are all of these things going on here with the way it plays. And it does feel very tropey. As we've said, this whole part feels so tropey, the way that they're handling the relationships in the film. And just to point out, I do feel we are missing a reaction shot of young Q scribbling down in his notebook here. That's exactly right. That's how you do it. That's what we need to be doing in this lab. Actually do some tests on people. I'm so set on that now. All right. And then this is how do you think that it works as far as how Joe Johnston decided to direct this moment about the uniform between the two of them? They maintain their stare at Peggy as she's walking away, as Steve pulls out the piece of paper and hands it to Howard, and then they have their little exchange there. Does that play, do you like the way that he directed this? I mean, it's very much designed. They're not looking at each other. It feels very designed. Does it work for you?
I mean, I guess it works. If we accept the idea of her as a kind of brassy 1940s Lois Lane kind of character, setting that bit aside, the bit about them not looking at each other, but handing the note over, I think it shows the kind of development of a camaraderie. If before they were slightly romantic rivals, or at least set up as potential romantic rivals for her attention, now the gap is closed between them and, they're both in awe of her but working together absolutely fine. I think it's a follow on from the fondue discussion earlier. There's a kind of on the same team kind of feeling about them.
The fact that they use this particular moment, watching her walk away, to build that camaraderie feels a little bro-y to me. And I don't know if when this movie came out, if it felt like this would be quite as dated as it feels a cultural statement. I don't necessarily hate it. It doesn't glorify the broiness of it. It doesn't do a reverse shot watching her in reverse walk away into another office. It doesn't really lean in on it, but it does feel a little bit as some of the rest of the exchanges in this. We've talked about the kiss this week, the Natalie Dormer bit. It can start to feel a little bit broy, and I don't necessarily know that that's out of character for the MCU entirely, but it feels a little dated to me right now.
I suppose they can get away with it being a film that takes place in the 40s. Yeah. To that end, they can say, well, yeah, it was the period.
Right.
But yeah, it does play that way. I do think that if anything, though, that I take away from this is at least it shows that Joe Johnston was trying to find a way to direct a scene where it wasn't just a shot of Steve and then a shot of Howard. or even just a reverse shot of the two of them in a conversation. But he found a way, you know what, let's do something where they're both just watching her and we can just have them deliver that. So to that end, I mean, the direction is fun. I thought he was doing something interesting there.
Yeah.
It's nothing groundbreaking, but yeah.
It doesn't feel sexual at all, and I think that's maybe a key thing. It's not like you said, you could imagine a version where they're watching her walk out the room and a kind of subtext is, that they're viewing her from behind. But even though they are literally viewing her from behind, their eyes are up. It looks very much like they're just in shock rather than, that they're being lusty.
I guess we're just sort of trained, right? That these sorts of two guys watching a woman walk away is supposed to be hypersexualized in film. And so I note the setup and that the payoff isn't, as you say, that sort of hypersexualized payoff that's good.
Yeah.
That's good.
I mean, I wonder if this is something where it's about breaking across the 2 minutes, so it's like if you view the scene directly, you see she's just unloaded the gun at Steve. It's, it's meant to be shocking. It's meant to be,
Yeah.
I think viewed in context, it's maybe a little less rowy, as you say, but I take your point.
Well, yeah, I think there's a lot of that. I think the moment that most closely fit what you were just kind of describing, Pete, is probably back in the Whip and Fiddle, when Peggy, when she first comes in with the red dress, and you actually, as she looks out to the group of guys in the bar singing, Steve does have a moment where he kind of like looks down and kind of checks her out from top to bottom.
Yeah.
So there is that moment there, but this, they shoot this purposefully not that way. It is very much about kind of just the reaction to what she just did, and this, deciding to unload a weapon in this lab, which probably isn't something that they would recommend,
right?
Even though Howard just blew the back of the room up. So, I mean,
right.
Clearly things are happening here. Any last final thoughts on what we have here in the lab, or should we jump into our montage?
We need a montage.
Montage.
That's right. Cue the music. It is time for a montage. We finally get the full reveal of the official Captain America that we're going to have for the rest of the film. Here, we started it in minute 79 talking about it, but this is where we finally get to see all of the pieces come in place. He said he picked the shield, he passed his notes over about the uniform, and now we get to see it. It starts off with the motorcycle. That's certainly something that comes into play. We saw Captain America on his motorcycle back in the TV movie, and that certainly came. Would you say that the motorcycle was pretty prevalent in the comics?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that's his kind of mode of travel of choice. And he does it in World War II, and then he does it various points, like in the Watergate scandal. He actually gives up being Captain America and goes on a road trip on a motorcycle to kind of re-encounter America and decide if he still feels comfortable with it, and so on. So it's a pretty well-worn, even if you go to buy the toys about Captain America. I have a 9-year-old, so if you go to the toy store, he's not driving a Corvette or something, or flying a helicopter. He's driving a motorcycle.
Sure.
Or a coupe, as we'll see later in this minute. No, that's very true. I always associate his character with a motorcycle. It just seems to be like, what Captain America comes with. And this is that moment where we saw the motorcycle also in the lab. And now he's getting it ready. It's got a shotgun holster in the front. He loads it with a gun, and he puts his handgun in his holster on his hip, puts his shield on the back. We now see it's fully painted, already as scorch marks. So I guess it's an interesting design of the montage to kick us off with. We're introducing the character, but he's already been using all of this in battle. It's like we're not even seeing him before the world has. Like, he's already been out there fighting. Now we're going to introduce you to him with, scorch marks and everything on his shield, and then we're going to show him as we go into the montage. Okay, Captain America, the look that we get in the movie. Jason, you've read a lot of Captain America comics. How do you feel they translated the look from the comics to this particular look? I know we had the theater look, which was kind of more in line with the comics, but how does that transition play for what we get here?
I mean, I think it's pretty great. I mean, to be honest with you, of all the Captain America, costumes from the entire Avengers cycle, I kind of think this is my favorite. It's both ridiculous as Captain America's costume is. I mean, in the comics, he has these like pirate boots. He has those little wings on his head, so he looks like Mercury. The letter A on his forehead. I always say, just in case you forget what country he's fighting for, which of course would be easy to do given the red, white, and blue and the stars and stripes. You just got to stamp a letter on his head. So given the patent ridiculousness of it, I think it's actually a really great, it looks utilitarian. It looks like it gives him some protection. It also stands him out from the crowd. One of the things I find fascinating about Captain America as a character is that we all talk about him having a uniform, right? Which is amazing. You don't talk about Thor having a uniform or Iron Man getting into his uniform or Spider-Man getting into his uniform, right? Superheroes have costumes or suits or outfits or something like that, right? But for some reason, Captain America gets put in a uniform, right? It's part of his kind of military connection. But of course, a uniform is literally meant to make one person look like every other person. That's the point, is to create a big group where no individual stands out. Except the officer or something like that. And, but here he is, clearly the kind of USO costume, so to speak, has been transmogrified into some sort of military outfit that both looks functional, but still makes him stand out, which obviously for the purposes of a movie, a highly visual medium, you need the superhero to stand out from everybody else. So I love it, actually. I think it's great. The idea of like his mask and everything being a helmet, I thought that really worked. Worked in a kind of ridiculous movie way, but I'm not going to go out and make one of these for myself, but wear it to work.
Right.
It's such a relief, this uniform, because everything that we've seen so far and all the other Captain America movies leading up to this one, everything's so vibrant and, just sort of pajama-ish. Like it's just everything's so colorful that it is actually sort of a relief just to see something that's muted, dirty, like the whites are dirty and kind of gross, like everything feels used and lived in. And so even though he does stand out from the rest of the Howling Commandos, he doesn't stand out in a way that they don't each stand out from each other, right? They're all wearing something that's kind of unique in their little group together, particularly in the hero moment we get at second, 20 through 22. Like it just feels like they are all unique individuals in this organism that is their little soldiery, which I think is really cool. I think it's really cool.
And notably, it's a multicultural group, right? I mean, when you talk about the difference within the group, right? Not entirely anachronistic, but, not anachronistic either. That it's every single person represents a different ethnic group and so on.
Yeah.
I think there are a couple valuable reasons for them to include the Howling Commandos. Obviously, they each, because of the fact that they're each kind of identified by something that really makes them stand out, it makes it that much easier for us to kind of connect with them as characters, as opposed to just having him, with, a couple dozen troops who really would just be red shirts at that point. This way, we are very easy to kind of click with. Oh, okay, that's the guy in the bowler hat. That's the guy with the beret. Like they each have their own little stamp that it makes it so much easier. And of course, then kind of their character quirks that also go along with that. And so that really helps in moments like this. But also, I think there is that element of the Howling Commandos representing kind of the concept of the American melting pot. And we get this kind of multicultural group that gives us this, Steve is all about the ideals of what America should be, not necessarily like the jingoistic American. And to that end, working with this troop here in the war, I think, I don't know, it seems like an important message to be putting in the film.
Absolutely.
Did you read many of the Howling Commandos comics?
I didn't read their comics specifically, but they appear in. They don't appear in World War II Captain America comics, but they do appear beginning in the 60s. The Sergeant Fury and the Howling Commandos was kind of launched as a retro war comic, and they were kind of retroactively put into Captain America, and then they do start appearing in Captain America stories in the 1960s.
I mean, I really enjoy them in the film here. I've only read them in passing, just like a comic here or there, and they seem like fun characters to follow. But I was never drawn as much to just kind of the militaristic sorts of comics. I wanted a little more flash and magic and everything.
I mean, it's a fusion, isn't it? Because war comics was a whole genre unto itself, very popular in the kind of 1940s, 1950s, and even into the 1960s. And there was a small revival in the 80s. There were like comics called like the Nam and stuff like that were kind of backward looking towards war. But I would say it's kind of not popular anymore, I would think. But you end up with, so the idea of kind of fusing a war comic and kind of into the Marvel universe was itself a kind of mashup.
And I mean, we're not going to likely see any return of these characters unless they decide to jump back and do another story in kind of the period where we would have these particular characters. But there's nothing imbued with these characters that makes them like super sorts of characters that would find a way to reappear in the modern era. So if we ever see these characters come back, it would have to be like in a one shot or in a TV series or something.
Yeah.
I think it is a real testament to the movie, though, to your point about about the Howling Commandos having not appeared in the World War II, just how hand to glove the whole fit is of all of these characters in this movie. There's nothing that feels sort of jarringly shoehorned in to a Captain America story. It all just feels very natural to bring all these elements together. I think it's a real, I think that's a real highlight of the film, to give us these characters.
And this is the moment. I mean, we saw Steve kind of building his team. We saw him asking all of these soldiers to join him to return to fighting Hydra. And here they are. Now we finally get to see it. On the Marvel Wiki, it specifically calls out 3 locations that they attack Hydra factories. The first is France in December 1943, then Belgium, January 1944, and then Czechoslovakia, February 1944. This montage actually continues until we get the attack on the train, which happens February 1st, 1945. So, I mean, we're from the time that, the story up to this point, like all the stuff that we had just been watching was November 5th, 1943. So from November 5th, 1943 to February 45, that really encompasses the entire montage. So we get a lot of time. And actually, there are a ton of comics and additional stories that they've told of this period in time when Captain America and the Howling Commandos are attacking various Hydra bases and working to stop Red Skull. Interestingly, we don't see Poland or Greece, but those two are included in the script, which I thought was interesting. And the way that it's actually scripted, they have broken up all of the different action in the montage. When they burst through the doors, that's in France. When Red Skull drives up after the attack, that's in Belgium. When this will be for another minute, but Bucky is on sniper duty and he saves Pete, that's in Poland. And then Czechoslovakia, that's where he bursts out of the factory windows on his motorcycle and then blows the whole place up. So it's the way that they end up shooting it and scripting it ends up, of course, being edited in a way where it's just like none of the places are identified. We just basically see them bursting into a place, attacking it, blowing it up, and Steve escaping on the motorcycle. But it's an incredibly fun sequence. What do you two think of kind of like just watching this group kind of bursting in and destroying stuff, and I mean getting a sense of them in action?
I mean, it's great fun.
I think I just want to call out one sequence that I think is worth noting. Speaking of tropes, as we have been doing this week, that this is just how counterculture Marvel is in terms of their presentation of effects. We actually have a cool guys don't look at explosions sequence where Steve actually does turn around and look at the explosion behind him before riding away on the motorcycle. And I think that's really important because they're really pushing the boundaries. Marvel is pushing boundaries of explosions and cool guys, which I think is fun.
I mean, is Captain America really a cool guy, though? I mean, that's kind of, he would be the kind of guy who wants to make sure it blew up right.
Exactly.
You're right. He's just thorough.
Yeah.
That's what he is.
He's
that's
fastidious.
what we've learned something.
Yeah.
Fastidious.
Puny Steve is not a cool guy.
Yeah.
And he's still the guy looking back at that explosion.
Can we talk about the car?
Well, before we get to that, before we get outside to that, I do want to jump back inside because we have something that is very modern in filmmaking. And Jason, I don't know if you caught this, but we have a moment inside the factory where Steve is taking down some Hydra troops with his shield. He hits a couple of them with the shield. And the second one he hits, we get some speed ramping done with the camera, where after he hits the guy, all of a sudden everything goes into slow motion as the guy flips through the air slowly, and Steve kind of stands there in a super cool action hero pose. I know it's a very small flash that we have of that particular moment, but and Pete, this might be more a question for you specifically with like camera tech and everything. Does it feel out of place in a film designed so largely by Joe Johnston to feel like a 1940s film?
This is the, I think, the Feigiest of Johnston moments, right? Like, this is the moment that makes it feel like, okay, we get that you're doing your Joe Johnston Rocketeer thing, but what really we need to have happen is we need a superhero at the end of this movie, and we need more hero moments. And this montage is all hero moments. You're absolutely right. It's poses, it's motorcycle, just even the shot before where they're coming into the barn, right? The camera pulls back and tilts way down as Captain America is over top of it, and then we get this hero twist moment where he's being speed ramped. So it feels to me like we're ushering in a new style and tone of filmmaking in just the way they're editing this thing in this montage that we have not seen in minutes 1 through 79.
This is the kind of, still in the early days of the kind of 3D film technology stuff, right? So like that bit where he throws the shield. Was that in this minute? I apologize if I'm breaking. Oh, just kidding. That didn't happen at all.
It's at the end of this minute. No, we
is
get
it
it
right
at the end of
this minute?
Yeah, we get him throwing and catching the shield.
Excellent. So thank heavens you can edit this whole bit out. But the bit about him throwing the shield directly at the camera, that's
what I thought you were talking about.
It's not very retro, is it? But it's because they need to fit in the kind of signature 3D moment that will help to move those tickets.
Yeah, that's what I thought you were talking about. And that one we don't get in this minute. That straight at the camera.
Well, cut the whole thing. Yeah. Cut the whole thing.
Yeah. Just something to look forward to.
I think there is a lot of that we get in the film. And actually, to your point, I suppose you could call out the moment when Steve bursts through the windows out of the factory. It's very much toward camera, and that could be seen as, this will be a great opportunity for the 3D. Steve is bursting through the flames and he's coming right into your face.
Yeah.
It's just a lot. It's a lot. It starts with this moment. It's like,
does that make you think of the TV movie though?
So much.
I feel like him coming off the helicopter, like this is that same sort of thing.
This out of the van, blowing up the helicopter, the jet powered bike, and then as an emotional salve, sitting in his jean shorts and sketching. No, I think this minute, like it does that thing that Captain America does, I think, really uniquely. And I'm curious the take on the global audience and how it receives this sort of America pandering. The fact that this has sufficiently patriotized such violence and fire in the name of the American war effort that I don't know how to look at as a non-American person. Right? Like, I'm curious how it's like you write books and talk about Captain America in a non-American place, in a non-American university. What's the reception?
It's interesting because I think especially when they were looking to do a big budget movie, probably a lot of these fears were really dominant, because it's one thing to sell Captain America comics but I walk around London and, I probably at least every day see one person who's got a Captain America shirt on, and they can't all be tourists, I guess they could, technically it's one, but it happens in the winter, I'll put it that way. So, I think there's something, there's both a kind of general globalization of the superhero itself that I think has happened, in a previous episode, we were talking about the effort to make Captain Britain and so on. And I think probably the superhero genre has kind of transcended its American origins. And at the same time, it keeps embedded within it some of these tropes and stuff that are, we might call Americanisms. And to some extent, other countries can buy into those, right? With the idea of, with great power comes great responsibility is something that like a lot of countries can grab a hold of and say, and not even ones we agree with, right? Can grab a hold of and say, well, of course we're powerful, therefore we should take more responsibility in the world, and that means us controlling more stuff and so on. So, the kind of power mythology of superheroes, I think, has blossomed and kind of localized in a range of places in different ways. So, to some extent, people can laugh at Captain America. He's certainly probably not everyone's favorite superhero outside of America. He's not everyone's favorite superhero in America.
In America, right.
But I think he doesn't come across as tub thumping for America. He comes across as a kind of moral individual. And people might object to the kind of association of that specifically with America. At the same time, I think people can get behind the idea of a kind of solid guy who does what he thinks is right, and is kind of incorruptible and disciplined. He's the opposite of the anti-hero, and a lot of people can get behind that, and they can kind of ignore the American part of it, And I think maybe that gets to the point about the Howling Commandos, right? That it's a kind of team effort. You've got Agent Carter, you've got Howard Stark, you've got Captain America, right? It's a team, even if he's the centerpiece.
Well, and you bring up with great power comes great responsibility. I think that the one that I think gets less play from this movie is I don't like bullies. I don't care where they come from. Like that's the non-American necessarily like sort of trope that this movie does. It just happens to do it with stars and stripes all over his uniform. And that's the thing that I think can be read as over the top.
Yeah. But I think he doesn't go on about America, does he? In his speeches, he almost never talks about it, right?
Really does not. Just the colors.
No. Mm-hmm. And the ideal.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's
right.
His perspective. The motorcycle that he's on is a 1942 Harley-Davidson WLA Liberator. And of course, it has some custom additions, hence the reason it was in Stark's lab. Speaking of vehicles, you want to talk a little bit about Schmidt's coupe.
Yes.
Red Skull pulls up in Belgium, very upset that the place is on fire. This is the curse you, you're always one step ahead sort of moment that we have.
If it weren't for you lousy kids.
In our montage here. What do you want to say about this coupe? What do you think?
Well, I mean, it's just amazing, isn't it? I mean, it's like Vladimir Putin's dinner table as a car. It goes on for a mile. He probably arrived at the factory 5 minutes before his body got there. I mean, it's because the car is so long and so glorious, and it calls to mind my if one can have such a thing, my favorite cinematic reference to Hitler's car, which was in Rat Race. If you ever saw that movie.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's a deep dive, but John Lovitz, there's this incredible comedy scene, which I won't try to recount here because it will not be funny. But it's, Hitler's car, this kind of extended luxury, ridiculous kind of Gothic machine. And it looks like they've just taken that and run with it. But it just begs the question, why is the car so long? What's the point of that? Could it actually turn a corner, in a urban setting? I don't know.
Well, that was my question, because we saw, earlier Zola drove it out of the factory in Austria, but we had seen Schmidt, in it, arriving in Norway at the beginning of the film. And now he's just like driving all over the place. And how is it for a secret organization? This goes back to our whole thing with Hydra being secret in any capacity. It's like he's the easiest person to spot. He's driving a car that is as big as a tank, and his head is red. I feel like people might notice.
It's got
this.
tinted windows. It's privacy is important.
It's not going to do any good if it's just the front window, because I don't see any.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
That's right.
I wonder about this car, like driving around in it. As cool as it is, I can't imagine him cruising through the streets in, other parts. And also, as we've talked about, he essentially has started war against Hitler as well, right? It's never specifically called out in the film, but when he kills the 3 SS officers back at his base, that's essentially him cutting ties with the Nazis and saying, you know what, we're our own thing, and we're going to fight everybody and take over the world.
It's kind of a remarkable scene in which they, I know it's not in our minute, but, where they're like, oh, he's worse than Hitler. Like, it's almost like a rehabilitation of Hitler. It's like, well, Red Skull is worse than Hitler. And it's like, do we need someone worse than Hitler? Couldn't he just be, couldn't he just work for Hitler? Yeah. That seems pretty bad.
Yeah. We solved this in the form of evildoers already.
Yeah, right.
I do like just a quick note on our clip with Peggy Carter here. She is handed a flag on a long stick as they're taking out targets. And note that she is still wearing her sort of practical outfit, but this time it is only slightly militarized. She has the little tie clip that is clearly some sort of badge.
It's the SSR. It's the SSR.
It's SSR flag, yeah. And so, but she's not wearing her full jacket and everything like everybody else in the scene. She's getting some authority in the form of a pin now.
And also to point out, they are removing the flag. Apparently, they just destroyed it. Again, none of this really makes sense, but it per the script. But if we're just guessing all of this is a montage designed just for us film viewers who haven't looked at the script, then basically the way that all of this played is they just broke into this base in Western Austria near Liechtenstein and destroyed this base. That's really kind of how it plays, because that's where the flag sits on the map.
And then we go to the woods.
And then we go to the frozen woods. We're in the middle of the montage, and the montage is going to continue. This is a moment that very much feels like we've just taken a beat and stepped out of the montage just to have this scene here. This is Captain America and the Howling Commandos and probably another dozen men or so walking through a foggy, wintry forest. And we get this moment where Captain America kind of has everybody hold, and then he kind of pokes around, and I don't know, what is it that gives this Hydra trooper away? Does Cap see him? As we know, Cap's senses all have been amped up because of the super soldier serum, but it's not ever clear. Like, is it his vision? Does he hear something? What is helping him to pin this Hydra trooper down? And then the shield boomerang. Let's talk about first just Cap noticing the guy. What are we saying about Captain America by having him be able to pin this guy who's essentially invisible up in the treetop above everybody?
He's a superhero. He has super hearing and smelling.
Well, what is it? Like, is he smelling?
He really doesn't, though. I mean, Captain America doesn't have super senses.
I thought in the comics, didn't all of his senses get amped up? Like, he can see and hear and everything a little better?
I mean, not like supernaturally. I mean, I think he's kind of like, peak human condition, but like, I don't think, he's not like Daredevil or someone who can like hear extra well or something like that. I mean, I think probably what they're trying to represent is this kind of attentiveness, that he's, it's not that he can hear or see better than everyone else, but that he's just,
super attentive.
He's just, attentive. It's all about his mind, I think. I mean, we're laughing, but it's, that's kind of the thing, right, with Captain America is that he's not, that he's supposed to be a product of his own work, even though he's a steroid freak, right? So in the 90s, they did a story in the comics, because of course by then steroids was like a real problem, and drug use was getting, there was a whole kind of moral panic about this stuff. And clearly someone had said, how do you have a superhero who's kind of the product of drugs? And, this is the kind of public narrative we're having. And so they did a whole summer story in which he gets exposed to some sort of kind of cocaine or crack kind of substitute, and has to get a full blood transfusion. So he loses the super soldier serum. His body kind of reverts to its original form. And then he defeats some villain. I can't recall who it was. I think it was Crossbones
as
or somebody.
A natural human.
Yeah, like he proves he can do it just because he's hardworking and diligent and strategic thinking and so on. But then, of course, it turns out his body cells have been permanently altered, and so he basically reproduces the super soldier serum like his body does it. And so then he reverts to being, of course, Captain America with his physique. And but now we know we've solved the question about his steroids, that it's not the drugs that make him, he makes him, So, sorry, that was quite a long digression, but I guess that, it goes to show how kind of important to the character is that it's not actually his superpowers that mostly make him significant. It's who he is and his discipline, his attentiveness, his work ethic, and so on.
Well, that's a good note because there's really nothing that the filmmakers, the storytellers, Chris Evans, there's nothing anyone gives us to hint at what it is about Captain America that allows him to pin this Hydra trooper down up in the tree and sling his shield at him. It's just he is being incredibly attentive. So I guess that is what it is. Like, we're not seeing a close-up shot of his nose per Pete's vision of him and giving a big old sniff that gives the guy away. Although I kind of wish that was there. That would have been fantastic.
I smell Hydra.
I know, but that's a Wolverine thing. He's not allowed to have super sniffer.
All right. Well, here is where the shield boomerang comes into play. This is the introduction in the franchise to Captain America's ability to throw the shield, have it bounce back, and he is able to catch it. This is just one person getting taken down, but this is the beginning of the boomeranging of it with vibranium. This is what I watched a video on Because Science on YouTube with them trying to explain this away. And, it's always so much fun. But the idea is that what it's doing, what they said is it's capturing, again, vibranium. When you look at like what it does in like Black Panther's suit, it captures the kinetic energy and then it releases it, right? It's not necessarily just absorbent or making it disappear, but it actually captures and releases. So what their thoughts were is that like it captures the kinetic energy when it hits the person's face, and then it instantly releases it and goes pinballing off in the other direction.
Oh, Andy, it's like red rag to a bull over here. I mean, what's the difference between immediately releasing the energy and it bouncing? I mean, that's
well,
that sounds to me like a distinction without a difference.
It sounds like a ball. It sounds softer. I guess when it's releasing kinetic energy in your face, it sounds like it hurts more as opposed to just a ball bouncing off of a wall. All of it, I know. It's dangerous.
If that was true, all right. Now, sorry, you got me going. Now, if that was true, when he threw the shield, you would have to wait a second before the energy was released to watch it actually move through the air, right? So
it's true.
This idea that there's a split there in time doesn't make any sense whatsoever. But I realize I'm being ridiculous.
The whole thing is ridiculous. And here we are. Yes, Pete. Go.
I appreciate the nature of this conversation, but this is not my central problem. My central problem is with the effect, because let's just take as table stakes that this thing can boomerang around. He throws it and it knocks the guy out, and then it tumbles like end over end. It doesn't boomerang, and yet he catches it as if it had boomeranged back to him. It's like the wrong angle. It's like this whole effect. This is the kind of stuff that that drives me crazy, because this just doesn't communicate what I think they want to communicate with it. And maybe that he's just not good at making it boomerang yet, but he's in the middle of a montage. Hasn't he learned?
Not the beginning of the montage.
Have you ever thrown a boomerang, Pete? It's not easy. It takes practice. This is his first try. He'll get there.
It tumbles.
I know. So did my first boomerang toss, Pete. Just saying. All right. Well, this is as far as we get to explore in the montage. We're going to be doing it some more next week with our guest then. But Jason, it has been a thrill having you on to talk about Captain America this week. Of so many different things to chat about. Any last thoughts before we wrap everything up?
Well, no, I just want to say thank you so much for having me on. It's been an absolute hoot, and I've laughed really hard, paid more attention to the movie, literally, than at least these 5 minutes of it, than I ever kind of thought I could. And but it's been a real joy and a real laugh, and thanks so much for having me.
Well, we have absolutely been thrilled to have you here, so we appreciate it. Tell everybody again, one last time, where they can check out your book and track you down.
Absolutely. My book is available on Amazon. It's called Captain America and the Nationalist Superhero. And if you're interested in the banalities of my life, you can find me on Twitter at RealJDittmer.
Fantastic. Well, we certainly appreciate you joining us this week. We will be back next week with the next set of minutes with the montage and see what happens. So, Pete, thank you as always.
I can't wait to read Jason's next book, Patient Zero and the Nationalist Super Zombie. It's going to be dope.
Absolutely. And then the sequel, Patient One.
Patient One. Oh, man. Until next time, true believers.
Marvel Movie Minute is a production of True Story FM. Engineering by Andy Nelson. This season's music is Spread the News by Anthony Vega, and this season's show art is by Winston Yabo. Find the show at truestory.fm, and if your podcast app allows ratings and reviews, consider doing that for this show.